his first administration.
Okay, today is June 28th, 2004. It's a Llewelyn J. Soniat interview by Dr. Raphael Casimir as part of the Dutch Morial Oral History Project. And Dr. Casimir, if you could clip that microphone on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We can do that.
And just state your name for the record.
Raphael Casimir Jr. For the record, interview on June 28th with Llewelyn Soniat.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
Ready? Okay.
Ready.
For the record, tell us something about your own background, your family, educational background.
Yeah, well, I was born on December 7th, 1926 to some really wonderful parents, Alphonse Soniat and Llewelyn Bro Soniat. And there were 5 of us in the family.
And you don't have to look at him.
Okay.
5 of us in the family. I had 2 older sisters and 2 older brothers. And we were, well, 1926, those were the Depression years.
You lived uptown.
Uptown in Carrollton.
Okay. What we used to call Colton.
Yeah, oh yeah. And incidentally, I still live up there.
All right.
But I guess being the last of 5 children, it gave me a wonderful opportunity to have older brothers and sisters who really looked out for me.
All right.
Because the 4 of them attended private school, St. John of Arc, during their early years. And then all 4 of them went into McDonald 35, and that's where they finished high school.
All of his siblings finished high school.
Right.
That was remarkable for the time.
I didn't think about it that way, but I guess it was.
100% at that particular time.
Right. But then it gave me an opportunity because World War II broke out. We all remember that infamous date, December 7th, 1941.
So that was how many?
15th birthday.
15th birthday.
Right. And the 2 brothers had to serve in the military, and of course, that's when the Depression really ended for us, when they went to the military, and every month a check would come home from both sons.
Wow.
So I was able to go to Xavier Prep High School, to finish my high school. And you talk about the 4 who finished high school, then 2, my oldest brother and my youngest sister were able to finish college at Xavier University. And as a result of me attending Xavier Prep, and into athletics, I was able to go on to college on an athletic scholarship.
What did you play?
Oh, football and basketball.
All right.
People laugh about it now because of my size, because I'm only 5'9" and about 160 pounds. I said when I was in high school, I was
Smaller
the
than
same height, but I was only 150 pounds.
All right.
But people were much smaller in those days.
All right.
In fact, we had the state championship team in basketball, and the tallest man on the team in 1944 was only 6 feet tall.
6 feet. Wow.
So you can see that it's a different, people are so much different today when it comes to their stature. But those were some pretty tough years in my early years.
But they were fun years, though, weren't they?
They were really fun because my mother had a brother who had 18 children.
18 children.
So we had
How many of them survived?
most of them.
Wow.
There's still 13 of them.
No, I mean, how many of them of the 18 lived to be adults? All of them?
At least 17 or more.
Wow.
17.
Wow.
One of them died early, I remember, with diphtheria.
Okay.
Some early disease that was quite devastating at that time. But it was like a village for us because we had a little shotgun house on Joliet Street that still stands. And then our grandmother's house faced Panola Street, and the backyards met.
Okay.
Which means that we always had somebody to play with.
I bet.
Yeah,
You had a couple of baseball teams and maybe 3 basketball teams.
Well, plus there were 2 other people.
2 football teams.
In that same house who had, the mother and father had died early, so had added 2 more to the 18, so that was 20.
Wow.
And with our 5, there was 25 young people usually around.
Wow.
So we always had enough to do whatever we wanted to do. And
Had a lot of protection too.
that's what I was about to say. At least the bad guys in the neighborhood knew that we had enough Bros and Soniats and Rishards that we could protect ourselves.
All right. You mentioned the prep. Did you meet Dutch Morial at the prep?
Dutch was at the prep when I was there. That's right, but he didn't stay around too very long.
What happened?
I don't really know what happened to it, but he was gone. Yeah, so I didn't.
But he was behind you. He was a couple of years behind you.
Right, at least 3 years behind.
3 years behind you.
So I didn't keep up with him, and I didn't know until later in life that, Dutch had left the prep, and of course he graduated from McDonald 35.
That was the only. Well, there were a couple of other private schools, right?
Yeah, we had Gilbert Academy, which was right where De La Salle is located now, and then we had Gaudet.
Right.
What other school did we have?
That was it.
And 35.
Booker Washington didn't open until 42.
Right. So Booker Washington was in existence when I finished Xavier Prep in 1944.
So when did you first meet Dutch Morial Timohian?
Well, I really got to know him when we were at Xavier University.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Well, he was an athlete too, wasn't he? Played football.
well, he played football at
35.
35.
Yeah.
Right,
Scat back, I think.
right. He was a running back, from what I was told, but he was so far behind. Well, 3 years behind, it means I didn't play against
Didn't play against him.
him. Right.
Okay. Now, he might have been too small to play at 35. I mean, at Xavier University.
He probably was too small for the university. Because even then, we had some larger men once you got to the college scene.
Right.
And I was still in school when the World War vets were returning.
Okay.
In fact, that was some good times at Xavier.
In what sense?
That GI Bill that veterans came back and were able to get their education, it was such a tremendous thing. Not only did they get their education free, then they got the books, and then they were given subsidies.
Okay.
They were given cash money to spend, which means that even though I was in the military,
All right.
I went into the military right after high school, into an Army Specialized Training Program at Howard University. I was fortunate enough to get out in January of 1945 after spending 3 days in active duty.
Okay.
And so it brought me back to school early.
Do you have any benefits?
One benefit, mustering out pay of $100.
Well,
And, well, no, I said one, but then with the government examination, they give you 5 points.
okay, you were a 5-point veteran.
5-point veteran. It helped tremendously. I remember when I took the post office test, I think I made it 84, and when I got the 5 points, it bumped me up to 89.
So when you were at Xavier in the mid to late 40s, rather, you knew St. Catherine Drexel? Or was she still there?
She as far as I know, she was spending time at the mother house.
In Philadelphia?
Right.
Okay.
So we would see her when she'd come to the campus, but I didn't know that.
Okay, but she did in fact come down occasionally.
Right, because, and what was remarkable about those years, most people were on some kind of scholarship.
Okay.
One of my good friends, Joe August, he's still living incidentally, because we went in the military together. But he worked his way through college by cleaning up and sweeping and cutting grass.
All right.
Because, the Drexel fortune was still in the hands of St. Catherine,
Okay.
Mother Catherine at the time.
At that time, right. Well, my wife went to Xavier, and she worked her way through school, working as an assistant in the library and the registrar's office,
Everybody had a way to get an education at Xavier at that time.
if they wanted to.
If they wanted it, that's
All right.
right.
So now, when you finished in 49, 50?
49.
1949, Dutch was still there. You had left
Yeah,
him
he
there.
was still there. Dutch didn't finish until 1952, I believe.
But did you know him at all while he was on camp? Was there
Oh,
anything
yeah,
that
yeah.
suggested that he might be a leader, extraordinary abilities later on?
I don't remember anything
Okay.
about that part of it.
Was he quiet? Was anything about him that stood out at that time?
Not in my memory.
Okay.
Most of the time we'd hang with our athletes.
Right. And since he was a couple of years behind you, did you know anybody in his family at that time?
Well, we knew his father-in-law,
Okay.
Dr. Heidel,
Okay.
delivered many of those babies that my
Okay.
uncle's wife had, you know.
Okay.
But I didn't know Dutch's father.
Did you know his future wife?
I knew
Was
it.
she there? No, she would have been too young.
Right, I didn't know Sybil at the time.
Right. So, what was your earliest remembrance of Dutch?
Just seeing him on the campus. But when we really got to know him, I guess it was mostly because of you with the NAACP.
But you knew him before I knew him.
Right, but
I mean, you knew him when you got actively involved in the New Orleans NAACP in the late 50s. Was he involved then?
well, he was with Turo and Trudeau
Trudeau, right,
and Morial,
right,
and we were all in the Claver building together.
okay. But you didn't have much of a relationship with him before?
Not too much,
Not too much.
no.
I mean, I knew him indirectly through his brother. Walter was assistant principal at Clerk when I was there, and he used to talk about his brother. And I remember the first time I saw him, I said, wow, that's Walter Morial with hair.
Yeah.
Looked just like his brother, except his brother was bald and he had a full head of hair at that particular time.
You didn't know Francis, huh?
I knew Francis later, but much later, but I didn't know him at that particular time.
Yeah, because that's the only three that I knew from the family.
Well, how did you get to know Francis? You got to know Francis later? Oh, you knew him before?
Campaigns.
Okay, but you didn't know him when you were at Xavier?
No.
Did he go to Xavier as far as you know?
I don't think he attended.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Did you know Dutch when the NAACP got involved in trying to get black students at LSU, I know, that first year? Because he was one of the lawyers of record, I know.
Well, with AP Turo and then, of course, we did a lot of recruiting.
I know that. That's how I got to know of you before
Yeah.
I got to meet you.
Yeah, because my wife was still living at that time. And when we learned that the school was opening, then we started looking for students.
Okay.
And, that's how.
Well, who did you recommend him to?
Well, we'd.
You suggested that they fill out an application? Or
Then we'd do it in cooperation with the lawyer.
Okay. So you had to do some work with the Turo firm at that particular time?
Marcel Trudeau, and of course Dutch Morial.
Right.
And they were the ones who would really receive, look at the applications and
Okay.
get them in.
All right.
And I know once it caught on that's where Louise was going to school at Booker Washington, I think we must have filled out applications for dozens of students.
Okay. Was Dutch playing a particularly active role at that particular time in the NAACP?
Well, he must have done some work with AP Turo.
Okay. Well, I know his name was on the lawsuit. I didn't know how actively involved he had been.
Mm-hmm. But he was, later, I didn't know at the time, but he had such a brilliant mind.
Well, I remember the first time I met him, I was just finishing my first year at LSU, and at that particular time, I thought I was going to be a medical doctor. And he indicated that he would file a lawsuit on my behalf to get into the medical school. And that's how we got a chance to talk. And then, of course, I tell him about my relationship with his brother. So we were fairly close from the first time we met.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You had any other experience with him as a civil rights attorney?
I think it mostly came with the Youth Council.
Okay.
When we really started being active.
All right. But, I mean, I'm talking before he got to be president. Were any lawsuits that you remember that he filed on behalf of civil rights litigants? I know his wife was a plaintiff in the suit
that's the one that really got
to allow women, to allow black teachers to belong to the NAACP.
Was he on the equal pay?
No, that'd have been before him. That was before this. He'd have been too young for that. That was true. I know Sybil was a plaintiff in the suit.
That they could be members of the NAACP.
Right.
Without harassment or intimidation.
And I know he was an attorney in the lawsuit to integrate NORD. Weren't you a plaintiff?
My children.
Your children were plaintiffs, okay.
Yeah, right. They came up. They came into Carrollton, and we had other neighbors who were part of that, so that we could use the playgrounds.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know he was one of the lawyers of records in that particular case. But again, at that particular time, because Churro was still active and because he was so much better known and more experienced, Dutch probably was still in his shadow until he became the president of the adult branch of the NAACP in 1963. I remember that very well because when he was installed as president, it's the first time I went to your house. You had just moved into your new house on Joliet Street.
That's right. We got in there in the early 60s.
1963.
Right. I helped my
And
man.
I remember we had the installation services at a church in Carrollton. I guess it was in Carrollton. And we walked over to your house at that particular time. But what do you remember him about as president of the local NAACP?
Well, the one thing that he could do, he could raise memberships and money.
Could raise money. We raised money.
Oh, yeah, big money.
He knew how to raise money.
Yeah. Then, of course, I guess I got a closer look at it because of your relationship with him.
Okay, he was president of the branch. I was president of the Youth Council.
And all the groups were autonomous, and you called the shots.
And I remember we had a little office, maybe about a third as large as this room, and we got too big for our britches. He kicked us out.
Right.
But then he turned around, and as the lawyer for the Knights of Peter Clay, we got us a huge office for I think $20 a month, $25 a month, something like that, which really was a major upgrade from what we had. We had some contentious relations, but usually we kept it in the family.
Right. I can remember once we got on Canal Street.
What do you mean when we got on Canal Street?
We started the boycott and picketing.
All right.
And then we would run into some hassles with the police. They were asking us to calm it down, give up the picketing.
Suspend the picketing, not give it up completely, but suspend. But we suspected that if we suspended it, that would be the end of it.
Because even when I tell some people who are close to me about how it happened on July 25th, 1963,
That's right.
because here we were students at the University of New Orleans,
All right.
and without calling the name of the organization, we went out there with another organization, and they deserted us after the first day.
First day, left us holding the bag.
Yes.
In fact, it was Dutch who insisted that we stay because we were confused. We were getting ready to leave, and he came down. I never forgot that in a little Volkswagen, and said, "No, you stay. I'm going to send a night letter." Never heard that word, night letter, to New York and see what's going on. 'Cause he insisted that we stay out there because somebody was cutting a deal to pull the picket signs off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, under your leadership, we really kept it going. I talk about now how you would suspend a person from a picket line.
Well, you had to have discipline.
Oh, you had it. And people would never believe it that we did from the 700 block to the 1200 block on Canal Street, Sears Roebuck, which was around the corner on Barone and Common,
Common and Braun.
and the pickets followed the instructions. I mean, it was just remarkable to me to see that kind of discipline.
Yep. Those were beautiful days.
Yeah, I think about men like Mr. Baquet, over at Paul Gross, about the church, St. James.
AME?
Yeah, right, the Methodist Church on Roman Street,
Mm-hmm.
where we kept the headquarters for 2 years. We'd have to walk out Iberville all the way to Canal Street. And at that time, it was predominantly white.
It was all white at that particular time.
Right. And sometimes we'd pass those ballrooms where those white men were drinking
Yep.
and acting a fool. But we went through them every day.
But we made it.
Sure, we made it. It's recorded in that book, Race and Democracy.
We made it. Now, Dutch stayed as president of the branch for 2.5 years, and then he left to become an assistant United States attorney. And it would be later in that capacity that he ran for a seat in the state legislature. You remember that campaign?
Yeah, I remember how the youth council got all those people registered to vote to make sure that he would win the election.
Your son Donald was president at that time. I remember I coordinated the campaign for the youth council.
There you go. Sure, it was in the uptown. It was in uptown ward.
First, second, 10th, and 11th wards.
Right.
And not only did we get the registration up, we also conducted the Get Out the Vote
Get out the
campaign
vote, Joe.
and
That's
won
what did it.
in the first primary. Nobody had expected that.
That's correct.
So there was Dutch Morial making history, the first black legislature in the 20th century, and little did we know that that was just a stepping stone to other things. Was that the first time you were involved in a door-to-door effort to get out the registration, to get the registration up and get the vote out?
That was the very first.
I know we had worked in a campaign to increase registration, I'm talking the youth council, in 1960 when Kennedy and Nixon were running for president. And that was the first time I realized that there were so many older blacks who really wanted to register to vote and how extremely difficult it was for them to fill out that form. But then it got worse in 1961 because in addition to filling out the form, you had to do the citizenship tests, crazy questions like who's the second president of the United States. And one thing I found out that most older blacks, if they were not very well educated, knew two presidents in addition to the current president. George Washington, everybody knew George Washington was first president. And they knew Abraham Lincoln was president, so assumed that Lincoln was second. And that was something that we had learned on. Oh, Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president. And questions like which amendment to the Constitution provided that senators would be elected by popular vote. Well, of course, there were college students, and in fact, law students who didn't know those questions.
Right.
So it was very, very difficult to register. In fact, when Morial was elected in 1967, it was only 2 years after the Voting Rights Act had gone into effect. And that all made it possible for blacks to begin running successfully for seats in the legislature. Now, Dutch ran for an at-large seat on the city council in 1969. I was not here. I was gone. I was in graduate school in Pennsylvania. Do you remember that?
Yeah, because that's the year Moon got elected.
Yes.
And just vaguely, though, you know, and that's how I remember it.
Were you involved? I assume that you must have been involved.
Well, some involvement.
Okay.
I wasn't as far out then as I was when he ran in 1977.
Okay.
Because, well, you know, I was working for the federal government,
All right.
and we were covered by a thing called the Hatch Act.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I mean, I knew that, but it never even dawned on me that you couldn't.
Saying, you know, you had to
That's true.
use some discretion.
That's right. You were retired when he ran for mayor, huh?
No, I was still working.
You were still working. That's right. You didn't retire until when, early 80s?
In the early 80s, but I'm saying that for the mayor's race, I went all out.
Right.
I just believed.
But I never even remembered that you were covered by the Hatch Act and you were limited.
Well, I was limited.
Right.
So, you know, I had to take it easy then. But, you know, I realized that based on what had happened when he first got elected and all the work the Youth Council had done,
Right.
that he would get elected in 1977. There was never any doubt in my mind that he would win that one.
So you didn't have any doubt that he would not reach the point where the overwhelming majority of blacks would vote for him, but very few whites would keep him from being elected?
I had no doubt.
Yeah, no doubt.
Oh,
Well, that's
no.
interesting because I remember he invited me to lunch at the Warwick Hotel, and I forgot who was there. There were two other people there. And he asked me if I would support him if he ran. And I remember asking him, well, do you think you could win? He'd say, well, I don't know if I'm going to run. But if I run, it's because I think I can win. And that really struck me that was 2 years before he got involved. And I worked to get the vote out in 1977, the first primary, and I was hopeful. But I think I was shocked, like a lot of people, that he came in a strong first in that first primary.
Right.
And during the second primary, of course, when the blacks who had voted for other candidates because they didn't think he could win, they all came aboard. So you got about 95, 96% of the black vote and maybe 20% of the white vote. And of course, as they say, the rest was history.
But I knew you had a good chance based on the house that we talked about. We moved in 1963.
Right.
that my wife was one of his early supporters. You know, she worked for a black insurance company.
Right.
So she wasn't covered by no foolish thing like the Hatch Act. And she was supporting him all the way, which means I was right there with her.
Right.
And we gave a tea at our house one Sunday in February of 1977. So that was early on.
Right.
And we thought maybe we'd get about 10 or 15 people to sit in that small living room. And much to our surprise, we had over 50 people there.
50 people in your little living
They
room?
go in the living room, they stayed on the lawn, they couldn't get in.
Wow.
And Dutch was there to greet him and talk with him because he called it a tea.
Right.
You know, because he's asked you to hold a tea, you know, no alcohol or anything like that.
Right.
And from that day forward, we were with him all the way. Because she could take off anytime she got ready from that black insurance company
Right.
to work in the campaign. And of course, I encouraged her.
Right. And if I remember, coincidentally, the night before she died, both of you had been at a Morial rally?
Big party on what we call the Mason Strip.
Okay.
There must have been over 1,000 people out there that night.
Was he there?
Yeah, he was there. He went to those different buildings that they had. Because they must have had about 4 or 5 different venues for where they drank and they entertained.
Right.
So that was May 23rd,
May 23rd, 1977.
because she died the very next morning.
I remember that.
Didn't live long enough to see Dutch get elected.
But he was there.
And the surprising part then, what was the black registration in 77? Do you remember?
I'm thinking maybe like 66,000, something like that.
Well, I'm talking about percentage-wise.
Oh, percentage-wise, maybe about 35,
Be
37%.
pretty close, because it was in the low 40s.
Okay.
Which means that the youth council must have been doing a terrific job to get those votes out there.
Well, more importantly, it was a turnout, because that was one of the
Yeah.
few elections where the black turnout actually exceeded the white turnout.
Oh, there's so much excitement.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that we have our first black mayor.
All right.
I know the postal workers, who we, mostly men in the post office at that time, who would come up to me and tell me, "Oh no, man, we'll never have a black mayor. We bet on everything, but they didn't bet that Dutch wouldn't win it."
No, because they didn't want to lose.
Right, but then when he got in the runoff with Joe DeRosa,
Right.
they knew then it was over.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. We knew then that he would win it.
Well, I remember must have been about 3 o'clock the day of the runoff, because I had to get up to Baton Rouge for an NAACP function for 7 o'clock that night. And I was working with Allison Sapatel, who had been president a few years earlier. And he was saying, "What do you think?" I say, "I think this was in the bag. I think it's safe for me to leave." And I say, "Well, I don't know, buddy. Let's go back and calm the area a little bit more." I say, "I think we're safe down here. I don't know what they're doing in the rest of the city." I said, "But we've gone over the lower 9 from the Paris line to the canal, and I think we're in good shape down here." And I got to Baton Rouge maybe about 6:45. The program started at 7. I was in and out of the program, listening to the television, and I was the one who reported to the delegates, "We won." And everybody knew we won, because most people, because their mind were not on what the speakers were saying. New Orleans, because Dutch Morial was not just going to be the mayor of New Orleans, but he was going to be a representative of blacks throughout the state. He had been actively involved in the state NAACP, and everybody felt that this is a victory for what we had been pushing for a long time.
Well, that was a big thing that Dutch took such an active part with the NAACP.
Yeah.
And I mean, throughout his life. And of course, when we go to these conventions, some of this was after the time that you were president, Dutch would be so nice to the youth council, man. When we were in New York in 1987, Dutch took the youth council out every night.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, big bucks.
But he was on the executive committee when he was elected mayor.
Yeah.
Then later he got on the national board of the NAACP.
Mm-hmm.
So he was primarily a civil rights worker who got involved in politics. In fact, that was sort of the extension of the movement, the things that we had pushed for to create a more equitable climate. Then he got involved as a politician. Well, what do you think was the most successful achievement of his first administration?
Well, the fact that we knew he would bring people together.
Okay.
Being a civil rights worker, as much involved as he was. You talking about black and white together.
Okay.
He was the man who really gave us a new sense of dignity.
Okay.
And we knew we were, many people I know were encouraged to know that you were good as anybody else.
Well, that contrasted with both of us being arrested in City Hall cafeteria.
Yeah.
That's, let's see, that was in '63. So here we are 15 years later. We have a black mayor. Who would have thought that in 1963 as we were being arrested for trying to take advantage of what other citizens just took for granted without even thinking about that. 15 years later, we'd be there.
Yeah, mostly because of Dutch. He did a terrific job. Outstanding, courageous.
Didn't you play a role in his first inaugural? Weren't you on the steering committee or something?
Yeah, a little bit, you know.
More than a little bit.
Yeah, well. It was just a little bit, you know, in my opinion.
A little bit, okay. He's being unusually modest.
Yeah.
What about the police strike?
Oh.
How do you think he handled that?
Magnificently.
Okay.
I mean, because when they went to his house with that, what was it, the crew of something, where they threw the eggs and tomatoes at the house,
Yes.
and Dutch wanted they were trying to make him back down and give him whatever they were asking for. He stood his ground.
Do you think his civil rights background had anything to do with the way he handled that?
A whole lot. He learned a lot from a man like you in the youth council. You taught him a plenty.
Well, but we learned from Roy Wilkins, don't be loud, be smart.
Be smart, oh yeah.
I mean, he had the last laugh. I mean, they thought they had him over a barrel, and he won.
But I didn't say here, and I guess I need to make this note, that you were the president of the youth council in 6 tough years, from 1960 to 1966.
Right.
And those were, man, crucial years. We can think of so many things that happened in those years that would made the average person turn around.
So maybe, again, because he was president from 63 to 65, maybe those experiences prepared him for tough decisions when he got to be mayor. This opposition may appear to be strong momentarily, but if you outsmart them, because we learned that, as you mentioned, negotiate in civil rights. A lot of the people who we heard names, as I used to call the names over the stores. They knew how to make money, but they weren't necessarily very bright.
But look at that, how you handle it when they would call us in to negotiate with Kelleher and McCall. That was a memorial day, memorable day when we were looking on Canal Street, our pickets, and they're trying to get the pickets off the Canal Street. Kelleher and McCall in that. We must have been in the 210 Baron building. It was a funny angle there that we could see right at Maison Blanche.
All right.
It was, they were even then trying to butter us up, so to speak, make us calm down.
And we were calm.
Sure, we were calm.
Just held our
They wanted
ground.
us to eat. Oh, no, we don't need anything to eat. We were determined not to get those pickets down until we got what we wanted.
Well, this is the thing that I mentioned about Dutch. Don't lose your cool. Just stay your ground and know which direction that you're heading in. And I think that's how he really fooled the policemen, because they assumed that the threat of canceling the Mardi Gras, okay, cancel it. Then what do you have?
That's
After
right.
that, you got no other weapon. And he won. In fact, in a sense, that's bad because I'm a union man. I think there is a need for labor unions, but they really destroyed any chance to have an effective union for themselves at that particular time, because they allowed racism to transcend union solidarity. And Dutch was not anti-union. He had, in fact, represented black labor unions in the past. But what they were demanding, of course, most people felt you could not give up the right to control the leadership of the police department, that they should not be allowed to join labor unions because they were part of the management team.
It was interesting that the black cops didn't go on strike.
Most of them didn't.
Right.
There were a few who did.
I
But
remember I spent that Mardi Gras there at Mason's Motel.
yeah.
And there we were with our Mardi Gras on South Claiborne.
But there was something else that Dutch got involved in that a lot of people kind of forget, and that was to keep the state from taking over control of City Park and Audubon Park. Did you use Audubon Park or City Park much when you were growing up?
Well, with the prep, the Audubon Park was between the prep and where I lived.
Okay,
So many times when I was out of season, of course, out of football or basketball season, we'd walk from Magazine, 5100 block of Magazine, all the way up to where I live in Carrollton.
okay,
And we'd walk through Audubon Park.
okay,
And the fact that Audubon Park had no fence around it, and they didn't have to have signs in it. No signs in Audubon Park. Blacks didn't use it.
okay.
We just walked through it.
That's all you would do, just walk through it.
At least we could walk through
I know you could play golf, I think, on Thursday afternoons. I don't know how many blacks could play golf on Thursday afternoons or any other afternoons, but that was the only time that they could use it.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't swim in the pool.
Nope.
That was part of the Nord Suit, that was one, but they closed the swimming pool.
Olympic-sized pool. Now, when they did desegregate the pools, we used it because we did have our
I remember.
the
Pool
Postal
party.
Office pool party. We'd have one almost every week.
That's at Audubon Park.
Oh yeah.
But do you remember there was a bill passed that gave control of the park to the state? And Dutch Morial was the one, he was mayor at that time. He filed the lawsuit and had to go all the way to the state Supreme Court, and the court ruled that Audubon Park belonged to the city. And the same thing was true of City Park. It was going to do the same thing with City Park, Audubon Park, and the airport. You know what I'm saying? The fact that he was not only a lawyer, but he had a record as a civil rights attorney, he was able to save these very, very important properties for the city of New Orleans and not give them over to control of the state,
Yeah.
which was really not paying the money for them. What about Dutch Morial's role in bringing in other blacks into city government, bringing them into other areas of politics?
Oh, in city government, man, it was so remarkable because, I thought about the persons who worked in the campaign.
Okay.
And many of those young people, Dutch just brought them in.
Okay, you're talking people like
Top
Vincent
position.
Sylvain and
Sure.
Paul Velto, people like that.
Right. Diane French Cole.
Carrie Pouchot.
Who else? There were probably many others that I just can't think of the names right now.
But what about one of the charges that was made that he did not groom anybody to be a successor in the mayor's office, that there were a lot of blacks who kind of chafed under his leadership, that even after he left the mayor's office, that he tried to exercise some influence in the mayor's
I don't think
office.
he was guilty of that.
You don't think he was guilty of that?
No, indeed.
Okay.
Man, opportunities had been open.
All right.
It wasn't up to him to be picking and choosing.
So you think that was even better that he didn't try to handpick a successor? And
That's right. Let the field be open for everybody. And of course, who knew that Sidney would be the next mayor after Dutch?
well,
I didn't know it.
all right.
I knew that I contributed and did the best I could for Sidney when he ran for the council seat.
Right.
But I didn't know he would be the man to be the successor to Dutch.
Right. Well, but what about some of the people who Dutch helped to get elected to seats in the legislature, or judgeships, or the city council? Was that a part of his personal influence, or these were just people who were able to take advantage of new openings as they came available?
I think Dutch had his hands in something with some of them.
Okay. Now, were you a member of his organization?
Never
Never.
a member of life.
But you worked very closely with
Closely
him,
with them, right.
but never a member of life.
I'm not a member of anybody else's political organization.
Okay. Well, a big part of his term also was Zulu. You never were a member of Zulu.
Never a member of Zulu,
Okay.
right. That was a fad then, I guess.
So when he wanted you to support candidates, he just contacted you personally?
Oh yeah, we'd always talk.
Okay.
The good part about it, that Dutch and I remained friends forever, because I was, even then, when he got elected, some thought I would go into his administration.
Well, he offered you something, didn't he?
Yeah, oh yeah, well, just passed it up. I thought I'd stay with the post office.
Okay. Well, did you still find easy access to him if you called him?
All the time.
Okay.
All the time. And When we were out of town, for instance, in 1984 with the presidential election, you know, when Jesse Jackson carried the state of Louisiana and Dutch had his big delegation going to San Francisco.
Okay.
Oh man, but we'd be out of town. We'd be together every day and every night.
So it wasn't the case that once he got elected, he cut ties with people who had been supportive of him.
Stayed close.
Stayed close.
Oh, that's right. He was charismatic, I guess. Is that the word? He had great charisma about him. And he was so good with the man on the street. I never forget when I ran for the House seat in 1987. And of course, I was very sick that year.
I remember that.
Of course, got to the runoff. The one person who kept me encouraged was Dutch Morial.
Yeah.
He would come to see me every day in the hospital.
Yeah, and see, that's the kind of thing that about Dutch that a lot of people don't know.
The rest of them deserted because they knew something was wrong with me
Yeah.
because they couldn't come to see me because it was only a few people knew I was in the hospital.
Right.
And of course, that's when I got elected to the State House of Representatives.
But I remember you mentioned the part of Dutch, and I think he may have been responsible for that a lot of people didn't realize that he was really, there was a soft side of him.
Oh, yeah.
That he tried to hide. Because I remember my son must have been either first or second grade at McDonald 15 in the French Quarter, and he said, Dutch Morial came by. I said, yeah. And he said, he knew you. I said, how do you know? He said, well, he saw my name tag. I say, well, what did he say? He said, well, soul brother, are you going to be like your daddy? He said, and I told him no.
Yeah, young.
So he had that side that I wish that other people would have seen. That, as you mentioned, when we were away, he would show it. I remember because he remained actively involved in NAACP. The last time I think we really talked in an extended period of time, we were at the NAACP annual meeting in New York City, and we went out 2 or 3 times together, and he really kind of opened up. And I felt that here's somebody who has so much to offer, and he's looking for something. He's really looking. Probably didn't know if he wanted to be a senior statesman, but I remember him telling me that probably what he wanted to do was go out and make some money and put the money to some good use. And I say, well, you remember our friend Emmett Douglas? Yeah, Emmett had money. I said, yeah, but he's dead too. And I thought about that because he died that same year.
Friend, Emmett Douglas.
So he died at 54. He made money, and making money is not going to be all of the answers to all the problems. So yeah, but if you have money, there's so many good things you can do if you know what to do and where to go.
But the main thing about Dutch is that it sticks in my mind clearly. Scandal-free administration.
Scandal-free.
Man,
The
that's
first
almost
black
unbelievable.
mayor,
No
and
scandal.
there were no scandals in his administration.
None.
Well, but you remember, I mean, sometimes when he was having these little meetings with his would-be supporters, that if you can make some money, fine. But if you steal, you're going to go to jail.
Right.
And he was pretty blunt about that.
Sure, he should have been.
Make some money if you can, but if you steal, you're going to go to jail. And you know that as the first black mayor, he was scrutinized pretty closely, and no scandals, and that's absolutely remarkable.
Right. Yeah.
But again, he comes out of that background, that old tradition. I remember Arthur Chapatall. Anytime he opened money, we used to use shaking canes to raise money. He would never open canes unless somebody was there.
Right.
There was a box that we'd have for bodyguard clubs to put contributions in. He would never open that box without somebody being there. And this is what they came up doing, got used to doing. This is a trust. And if you violate the trust, then of course, then you're going to pay the consequences for it.
That's why the youth council was always with some money. You said
You need money
tradition.
to be successful.
That's right.
And if you don't have any
Raised it
money,
the right way.
that's right.
Oh yeah.
Can you recall any of the people who were involved in his campaign who subsequently became successful politically themselves?
First one that comes to mind is always Paul Valto.
Paul Valto, oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Who else? There must be others.
Bill Jefferson started off as a
There you go.
Memorial ally.
Mm-hmm. Bill Jefferson. Who else? Any females?
Well, that was one of the criticisms that's like a lot of New Orleans feel that women had a protective status. I remember when Alma Young retired from being one of his administrative assistants, she pointed out that he had not, in fact, pushed women. She didn't say black women or white women. He had not pushed women assistants as much as he had pushed men. And that was true of a lot of the people who probably, not because they were malevolent, just were traditionalists.
Mm-hmm.
I think, again, had he lived longer, he would have been part of the evolution pushing women for leadership roles himself. I suspect he'd have been a strong supporter of Kathleen Blanco for the governor's office. But at that particular time, there were so many leaders who saw women as being supportive. But didn't he support your wife when she ran for the
Oh, yeah.
Constitutional Convention?
Right, in the early 70s.
Yeah,
She won it.
yeah.
I was looking at that Constitution when I was looking for some material on Dutch, 1973.
Yes.
Got the draft of the Constitution. There hasn't been any since.
Nope.
73, that's 30 years ago.
31 years. April 20th, 1974 is when it was adopted.
Oh yeah, the historian knows all of that.
A couple of final questions. How would you rate Dutch Morial as far as mayors that you lived under?
He's so far above the ones I've lived under since Dutch became mayor.
No, I mean during your lifetime, period.
Oh, well, I mean, the ones before him.
Before and after.
Saying.
Okay. Well, I mean,
And the ones
I want you to
after
say, why would you rate him ahead of some of the mayors like O'Keefe and
the thing I just
Walmsley
mentioned
and
about
Morrison?
scandal-free administration.
Okay,
That's number one.
that's
And then to break down some of these, he broke down so many racial barriers,
Okay.
man. I mean, things that just wouldn't have happened if Dutch hadn't been around.
okay.
And, you know, he would get a A in my book.
Okay. A minus, A plus,
A plus.
A plus.
Oh, yeah, he was one of the best I'd seen.
Do you think he was conscious of the fact that he was first and that there would be people watching him and he would be a pattern that they might want to look at in the future?
I think he was conscious of that, and that's the reason that he handled it so well.
Okay. And you believe he handled it quite well?
Oh, outstanding.
Okay. One last question. If he were alive today, 2004, what do you think he'd think about the current political situation and the mayor's office and the school board, the judicial system?
I think Dutch would have to go into a solitude and think this one over. This is the worst I've seen in so many areas.
Yes.
Even now, as we do our community activist work, we don't know what to take on. We don't know whether we should deal with the city government or the school system or look at the state government.
Isn't that ironic, though? Because before, in the 60s, we kind of knew where we wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
We had to prioritize sometimes, but now, would you say, as a community activist, an African American in the 50s, 60s on, has there been any disappointment about the direction that politics have gone since that time?
Oh yeah, I've had great disappointments.
Okay.
Some of them are present today that I won't talk about here.
Right. Well, it's not what we would imagine we
No,
were pushing
I didn't
in
think it would be this
the
way.
1960s.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, daily we see the front page of the paper. That's what it is, you know,
Yeah.
about the corruption.
About money.
Yeah, stuff that we don't have. And look how much happier without it. If I had to be under that kind of pressure because I was a millionaire,
All right.
I'd rather be on my government pension every month
Yes.
and live within my means.
Yeah. Well, and more than that, with respect.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Good names, much more important than money.
Look, Yasmin, I'm not that great a Christian, but I'm praying for many of them.
Keep praying for them.
Oh, yeah.
I remember Dutch Morial lecturing me. We were coming back on a flight, and they were serving complimentary wine or champagne or something. He's lecturing me about drinking that little bit in public because somebody would say that you're drunk. I said, no, he said, you don't know they're watching you. So he mentioned that nobody would have an opportunity to say that. They saw the mayor falling down drunk because they wouldn't even see him drink. And I thought that was really interesting that he had that kind of concern about his image.
Right, he didn't drink publicly. Now, when we'd be in his hotel room, he might
Drink a
little
beer.
sip of beer,
Right,
but that was it.
right. Never smoked.
Nope. That's right, good family man,
Yeah.
all the way.
Any final comment you want to make?
Oh, I just want to thank you for allowing me this opportunity to be on camera
All right.
and to talk with you.
Okay.
All these many years we've been talking. When we met, when you were 17?
1960, it's almost 44 years. I met you on the telephone in June of 1960.
So I'm just happy to be here. I thought this was informal.
When you think about all of those who've gone since then,
Well, that's another big thing. Here I am still on my feet.
still alive.
Still blinking.
Okay.